Hello again, this is Professor Lucien, and this is Lecture 2 for Safety 380, Introduction to Occupational Safety and Health. In today's short lecture, what I'd like to do is give you kind of the background or the foundation for what I believe is occupational safety and health. So after this video, I would also like you to read Chapter 1 of the Administration and Programs textbook from the National Safety Council. They also go into it as well. I think you're going to see a lot of similarities between what I say and what they provide. For this week's quiz, I would recommend you spend a little time with the study sheets. The study sheets are a voluntary study guide for you, and I do provide some of the answers in them just to kind of give you, kind of like priming the pump. You can also look at the questions at the end of the chapters that are assigned that week. Both of those are going to be the primary sources for the quiz questions, which will be multiple choice. The weekly assignment, just like last week, has questions relating to the concepts from this lecture and any other lectures. So let's go way back in time, pre-industrial revolution. What kind of work would you typically find in a community? Well, you've got the craftsmen, the people who had, there were sort of the specialty trades. So I've got a picture of a blacksmith. So blacksmith, cobbler, there's probably a baker. There are people who had marketplaces. So these were trades that were, the skills or the business were developed and probably handed down from parent to child, typically, unless somebody came on as an apprentice. And later on there were guilds, and those guilds contained the knowledge base for a particular profession, if you want to call it that. And so they would study underneath a master craftsman and work themselves up to journeyman, and then journeyman in a career would make you a master craftsman. But then there were also other careers in which people maybe served others. Below you see we've got farmers or farm laborers. So back then you had the lords that owned land, and then they took a percent or an amount from the whatever their land was used for as payment, and that's whatever's left over the workers had for themselves, or they brought it to market, or they would sell it to one of the other craftsmen, and then they would turn it into something else. So that was kind of the way society was set up. A majority were the laborers who served others. You had a middle class, which were probably craftsmen, soldiers, and then you had the lords, the landowners, the ones who had titles. Then we had the Industrial Revolution. And from what I can gather, based on things I've read and videos I've watched, documentaries, it began with a fired or steam pump to remove water from mines. Because I guess they were sending up, containers of coal, but they were also having to send up containers of water in order to do their work. And what they found is, but through mechanized water removal, they could increase productivity, and that got expanded out to all kinds of different industries. Probably the most, transportation was a big one. That's the locomotive. But there's also the textiles, so mining, textiles. And it got expanded into many, many other industries. So it was that consistent power source that allowed a factory to come into being. And there were operators there that were working with the mechanized work, either supervising it or using it to their advantage. And they were able to complete their tasks at a much greater rate, generate much greater energy or power. And in doing so, it kind of created a complete new design to our society, because now goods could be sold at a much lower price, and they were more consistent in their final product. However, it was also the interaction between human and the mechanized work that gave birth to what we know today as the occupational safety and health field. Prior to that, there were safety and health issues, but they tended to be intertwined with, say, the craftsmen, the trade that they were learning. It was built into that. They were controlling it themselves. The people who were soldiers were out in the field. Safety and health wasn't even really much of a consideration. Maybe in some sectors it was, but for the most part it was almost expected that you'd get hurt, and Then you would have to be taken care of. Somebody else would step in. But here we had a much different scenario that was, enormously profitable, and not only good for the people who own the factories, but also for the public, who was able to now had more purchasing power. They could get more things. But as I say at the bottom here, we had unskilled, uneducated labor being put into positions that they have no recollection of what they need to do, and a lot of people got hurt and killed because of it. The Industrial Revolution started in, Europe and England, and then came over to the U.S. And prior to any form of workers' compensation rules or factory safety inspections, which is all early, late 1800s, early 1900s, employers had a common law set of common law rules that they could use to basically negate any sort of responsibility that they or the company had in order to compensate or take care of the workers. And you can see the three classifications here. This is directly from the textbook. Fellow servant rule, so that is a co-worker negligence, contributory negligence, which is self-negligence, and finally assumption of risk, that it was dangerous anyway, you should have looked out for yourself. And that, so who took care of the injured workers or the families of those who were killed at work? It was typically social safety nets, primarily religious congregations, or again, like I said, social. I want to say social security, but community assistive organizations would take care of them, or they would have to either move or readjust the way what their living is. But still, even with people getting hurt, being people killed, and then there's no way for workers to continue. So it was an issue, but until the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which is something you're going to watch. And that was really considered the foundational disaster that put in place, or actually started developing professional organizations for safety in the United States. But it was not a clean cut, we should do this now, it's a good idea. It was a fight. It was a true fight. And it wasn't, and so that was, I think, 1911. And it wasn't until, 1969, 1970 that in the United States we adopted the OSH Act, which we'll talk about later. A major contributor to the way things were was Frederick Wilson Taylor. Winslow. Is it Wilson or is it Winslow? It's Winslow. So look at the picture. Wilson doesn't seem right to me. We just call him Frederick Taylor. He wrote a book called Scientific Management. He's considered the father of industrial revolution, or industrial engineering, which was my focus in my grad school. And so, of course, I read his book, Scientific Management. And what he did is he brought a stopwatch to the workplace and found that if he broke down a worker's task into simplified steps and timed it, he could improve productivity, improved output. His basic assumption is that the average worker is lazy. And he termed that soldiering. He called soldiering when somebody is just doing enough to make it look like they're working, but they're really not working that hard. And so what he set out to do was to select workers who he believed to be ones who wanted to perform better, broke it down so that they had it was more simplified tasks. He gave them proper equipment to achieve greater productivity, but then provided a work rest schedule as to not overburden them. And then he finally incentivized them with more pay. So if you follow his work rest schedule, use the tools, do the work steps as designated by Taylor, your production would double, possibly triple, depending, and you would get compensated much, much more than others. And in his book, he has his test subject is called Schmidt, and he is not very kind to Schmidt, basically making him sound like a complete simpleton that, as long as he waved money in front of his face and kind of insulted his character, that this guy would work harder. And he did. And it was this methodology. I mean, I'm sure you guys are listening to me right now and be like, this sounds horrible. Yeah, it is. But to the companies that he worked for, I think it was a steel company in Pittsburgh. I can't remember the exact name of it. Uh, it was good, but work groups did not like it. It really took all satisfaction out of the day. People could possibly get hurt should they attempt to do more than what is required, or if they aren't physically fit enough to hold up to Taylor's very rigid work design. So initially, the engineering community rejected it because it focused way too much on the worker doing everything and having them not think, and that caused problems. He actually had to stand before Congress because of his piece rate. That's the way. That's what they called it when people are working more. You work more, you get more money, and today that's an illegal practice because people will put themselves in a position of getting harmed or hurt in order to make more money, and it's the employer who created that basic premise. Actually, when I worked for OSHA, I had several citations, general duty, that went out because of piece rate type work. Labor, of course, fought against it, and many might say that it was Taylor's, basic premise of working people beyond what would be considered their level of comfort and forcing them to become more of a cog in a bigger machine than a person. And some may say that the creation of labor unions were a reflection of workers not wanting to work within a scientific management principle. There was also a incorrect assumption that operations simply require common sense, which there really is no such thing as common sense. Only if people were raised from birth to adult in a vacuum. So they're all exposed to the exact same experiences, exact same lessons, everything like that. Then there would be common sense, but we're not. That's not the way it is. Another thing is, even in his book, and I've got a quote right here, he refers to the typical worker as a beast of burden, or an oxen. And so I just wanted to know that's what he thought of workers. So if that's your perspective, if you approach the design and management of work saying that a worker is a beast of burden, you're not going to treat him with respect. You're not going to care that they're sore, in pain, that there's other things going on. Do the work, or I'm going to whip you or replace you. So yes, some people say that Taylor's work, and this is going to the next bullet point, found a relationship between productivity and injury rates. Well, the basic idea of that principle is that if you're not working, you're not producing. That's the way he viewed it, which is why he had the work rest. But again, he predicated it on the best workers and then tried to supplant it onto others that weren't as physically or maybe motivationally fit, but maybe they needed a job, and so people got hurt. People were unhappy. Henry Ford credits Taylor with giving him the impetus to come up with the conveyor belt or the assembly line. And as the story is told, and I think you're going to watch a video. Yeah, you watch a video on this. He was just watching people doing the work, and he decided, what happens if the people who are doing the work were stationary and the work came to them? And so he actually just tied a rope to the front axle of a basic structure and had a couple of the strong people pull it past the other people, and he saw the value in it, and so that was the creation of the assembly line. Ford was given that. Ford provided excellent wages and benefits, but he fought hard against labor unions. And I watched a 3-hour documentary on Ford, and he thought a lot of himself, and some of the things he did would be considered inhumane, but he is still credited with developing this great Ford Motor Company and for the first assembly line. So we still celebrate things he had done. What you'll find is when you watch the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which I think is next week, there was an attempt of New York clothing workers to unionize in order to demand better work conditions, better pay, things like that. And back then, the business owners, the capitals, the people who ran capitalism hired thugs, paid police officers, and other people to attack and jail protesters. This is kind of really pre Bill of Rights, I guess, because it was allowed for a long time. It wasn't until some members of high society stepped in and goes, no, 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 these people deserve humane conditions, humane pay, and respect. And it wasn't until then that the lawmakers started taking up the idea of occupational safety and health rulemaking. Safety committees were also came out of this. Okay, you guys want safety. What does that mean? Okay, so the workers would get together and with maybe supervisors, and they'd come up with internal solutions. There's two types of committees. There's the kind that have labor and management. There's kind that don't. If you have the type of organization in which workers are intimidated by management, it's not good to have a labor management committee, because the workers' voices are basically being either suppressed or they're presumed punishment should they speak up. But if you do have an organization that the workers are not afraid of management and they want to work together, that's a more productive relationship or project. So that's all I really want. Read the textbook chapter, watch the videos I provide, and any other readings that I choose to post. But again, refer to the questions at the back of a chapter when I assign it. Refer to the study sheet. Those are the main things I really want you to take away. But I just wanted to give you some insight into where, the birth of the occupational safety and health profession. That's really where it came from, due to changes in society, the bringing in of unskilled educated workers, and then the attempts to increase their production. All these things kind of led to the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which in the U.S. then gave birth to a lot of the professional organizations. But we'll talk about those in a future lecture. Thank you.